presented by Complete Quarterback. I'm your host, John Sirianidis, and this week I have the good fortune to be joined by Stoughton High School head football coach Chris Evans. Coach Evans, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time, man. I know it's a busy time of the year now as we approach Memorial Day weekend, and it's hard to believe that here we are. We're both in the education business. Here we are getting closer to Memorial Day weekend, and we've got about a month of school left. And before you know it, we'll be in camp and we'll be talking about the upcoming season. But first things first, just some thoughts on year one of taking over the Stoughton football program. Of course, last season was your first year at the helm, taking over for Greg Burke, who was a fixture with the Stoughton football program. How would you categorize year one? What are your thoughts on where the program is right now?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to this is my obviously first year at the helm, but my 9th year in the program. So kind of having that investment and also kind of having that institutional knowledge, I think has really helped me to kind of make those benchmarks. We finished under 500. We snuck into the playoffs. We got bounced round one, and that was definitely not the goal ever. However, we did have great development. I think if you watch our tape from, week one through that playoffs, you see improvement every single week. We get to see that firsthand during practices. So definitely a good kind of foundation to build off of. Certainly not a success, but, looking back on it, being able to reflect, there were some successes that we can definitely build on. And graduating in just 2 weeks, graduating a group that I'm really, really incredibly proud of. Really indebted to that group of, it's about 20 seniors, one of our bigger groups to come through. So like you said, coming from education, that's always kind of, goal one is making those connections and seeing those guys through. So at the end of the day, being able to say that was my first group coming through is definitely something that I'm going to take a lot of pride in. And then we turn the page with a lot of optimism for the future.
And obviously, not only are you familiar with the program, as you mentioned, you spent 9 years coaching there, but you know the league well. You played at Foxborough High School for the legendary Jack Barnelli. How much did that experience help you going into the Stoughton job?
So I think just kind of knowing, and again, it was 2014, when Greg brought me on to coach freshmen. Just knowing the expectations every week that, if there was a moment where I didn't want to be breaking down film, I knew every other staff in the league was going to be breaking down film. If I knew that, that you got to stay on top of it. So it was kind of knowing that, just from seeing the Foxborough guys work and obviously, the other great coaches around the league as well. So knowing kind of what the expectations were from day one was certainly helpful. And then it's been a learning experience ever since.
And obviously it helps that you're in the building. That's a big part of it. Coach Burke, of course, taught PE in the district for years. How important is that for you being in the building? You talk about cultivating those relationships with the kids. How much easier is it to do that knowing that you're there on a day-to-day basis interacting with them and working with them, not only as their coach, but in another capacity as well?
Yeah, it's huge. And I mean, my hat truly goes off to anyone who's able to do it without being in the building, without at least having.
I would agree.
In the building, it's seemingly impossible. So I'm a school counselor. I have a quarter of the schools on my caseload. But it's an awesome way for me to have access. It's an awesome way for me to make those connections on and off the field. And that's just been such a seamless kind of transition for me, to starting out, in coaching, at the younger level and probably not having a ton of confidence, just as a younger professional. Coaching was an awesome opportunity for me to show exactly who I was. I wasn't wearing a shirt and tie on the sidelines, and, kids could come see me coaching a JV game and I was in sweatpants running up and down the sideline and stuff like that. So, and then being able to connect that to what I'm doing professionally as well. And then kind of building the staff a little bit and trying to make some of those more connections within the building, has been a challenge, but we're definitely trending in the right direction. And then, I'm able to be, not just the go-to guy when it comes to, so if we want to talk about the recruiting aspect, I'm making the calls to the coaches. The coaches are actually coming into my office. I'm actually the one sending out the transcripts, right? I'm the ones helping send out the applications. So when we get to that point, that's been so seamless. And then at the same time, we'll have an 8th grade move up day in a couple weeks where the 8th grade will come and see the high school. And just as a counselor, I'll see all of my kids at that point and be able to meet with them and kind of go through. And so having that connection kind of day one through day, the last 180 of senior year is so rewarding, but it's so key. And again, obviously we're not seeing the fruits of that yet because this is only year one. But it's one of the many reasons I have, to be optimistic about where we're headed.
When I think of Stoughton football, I think of tough kids, hard-nosed kids, physical kids. I've coached at King Philip for years, and we've had battles with Stoughton. And that's always been our takeaway, that Stoughton kids are going to battle you for 4 quarters. Like I said, they're tough, they're physical. Is that still the mentality there? I mean, we talk about times changing all the time, and I'm going to get into that with a separate question here in a minute, but is that still the mentality in the program, you think, or do you think it's changed?
So I think there's definitely been a shift. And I don't really prescribe to the idea that like this is a softer generation or anything like that.
Right.
I think it's a more informed generation. I think it's a kind of a more intellectual group. So working smarter, not harder, is big. And if you look at the roster, if you look at the Stoughton roster from, 15 years ago versus what it is now, the makeup is completely and totally different. So I think at the heart of it, at the core of it, it's the same. These are hardworking, tough-nosed kids who do like to mix it up, who do like contact, who do like kind of getting into all that as well. But with kind of bigger aspirations as well. So that's been kind of a fun challenge. And again, it's a cultural challenge. And it's great. It's an awesome opportunity for me every day to kind of, expand my horizons a little bit. So yeah, I would say at the core of it, it's the same, but it probably looks a lot different in how we practice and how we prepare. And then the field on Fridays.
And obviously a question that I ask every coach that I have on, that I've had on here for the last few years that I've been doing the show, is, have kids change? We hear this all the time, and you kind of sort of answered the question, but do you think kids have changed, or is it more or less times have changed? They have, more of the world at their fingertips. Things are just easier in terms of accessing information. Do you think it's more that, or do you think there has been a shift in the mentality of kids?
So I think there's definitely been a shift in the mentality. I also think that we've unfortunately lowered our expectation for what these kids can do and what these kids are capable of. So if we're the ones who are supposed to be setting that bar and setting that example, it shouldn't be surprising if we set it low and someone meets us at a low bar. So that's something that I really try and promote, and I really try and preach. Like, my level of expectations are going to be through the roof, not because that's how it used to be done, or not because that's what coaches would have expected from me. But because I honestly and truly believe every kid who's going to suit up and put the time in deserves us to hold them to a high level, with supports built in. And I think maybe that probably is the biggest piece that is different. Students growing up in 2024, and again, there's no amount of money in the world that you could pay me to be a student for one day and go through what all these kids go through with, like you said, the access to the social media and everything's at the click of a finger. I do think we need to just be smarter about how we build in our supports and offer our resources, that we're not offering a crutch. That we're not going 90% for the kid who doesn't even want to meet us with 10%. So I think it would be ignorant to say, like, no, kids are the exact same. But also I think it's short-sighted to not take some ownership as the adults as well, and control what we can control. And really all we can control is kind of what our expectations are. And that's something that I try and do kind of from day one. We had a clinic over the weekend, and I had grades 3 through 8 at it. And it was awesome. It was great. It was old school. The kids were out running around. It was raining. No one cared. But again, just letting a kid know in 3rd grade, like, this is what the expectation is. Like, you're here. This is something really, really cool that you're a part of. But you don't just get to show up, right? You got to do this. You got to do that. And so I think as we build in, kind of those benchmarks for kids and set very clear expectations with very, very, very clear consequences, and also be willing to kind of reward when we hit our benchmarks. Kids really thrive in that kind of safe learning environment. And I think people hear safe and they think soft, and that's not what it is at all. Empowering students to make the right decisions, to make the right choices, to be in the right position on the field, whatever it is. I think that that's really something that we need to unlock as professionals to address these changing times. And I think if we can be successful in that, we can certainly be successful on Friday nights.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. A lot of coaches that I do have on the show will tell me they don't think kids have changed, but I do think kids have changed. And it's not necessarily their fault. I think they're a byproduct of the world we're living in now. I think things have changed, and as a result, kids have changed. But I also think you bring up a great point, Coach, in that our expectations of kids have changed, and it's not good. We're not raising the bar; we're lowering the bar, and that's a major problem, in my opinion, in education. It's a major problem in athletics. And I'm 49 years old. I would imagine I'm 10, 15 years older than you. I look at it as, back in my day, here we go. I didn't walk uphill in 10 feet of snow, but, you were pushed. And I remember when I first got into teaching, we pushed kids. There was an expectation. Now, all of a sudden, there's this whole, thought process about uniformity, and everybody does the same thing, and everybody has to be the same. And the reality is, you could still push kids across the board and then try to see where they're at and work with them at that level. But this idea that we're lowering the bar, it doesn't help kids later on in life. I think it hurts kids. And to your point, that falls on us as the adults to make sure that we're setting a standard that they can meet. Because right now, I don't think the standard's very high.
Right. Yeah, and I think about the group that I had this year as seniors. I'll just take my captains, for example. That's a group of kids that you could pick them up and drop them into any era of football, any era of education, and they would thrive because they were willing to reach out. They were willing to access their resources. They worked incredibly hard, first guy to show up, last guy to leave mentality. That still exists. But if you let a kid know that the expectation is that, they're not going to be what kids were 15 years ago. They're not going to be what kids were 15 years ago, for better or worse. And yeah, so it's a great challenge that we get to tackle that every day, which is fun. Keeps me coming back for sure.
Oh, absolutely. You are watching the Coaches Chat presented by Complete Quarterback. I'm your host, John Sirenides, and this week I'm joined by Chris Evans, head football coach at Stoughton High School. Coach, I want to ask you about your philosophy when it comes to building a program. Everybody's got a different philosophy. They've got core beliefs, core principles. What are your core principles and beliefs? What are things that you think you need to do as a program on a day-to-day basis to eventually have the level of success you've had in the past?
Yeah. So number one is stability, and that's work ethic and that's expectations. So I don't like surprises. And so that means I don't want the kids to be surprised. I don't want to be surprised. So open communication kind of from day one. And again, being in the building is obviously a huge key part of that. But guys are going to get a message from me every single day, whether it's through email, through Google Classroom. I make myself accessible. They can come find me before school every single day. So that way we're not waiting until 3:30 when we're already out of practice. If there's an issue, something has to get addressed. So communication's key. That has to be the foundation of everything before you can talk about trust or anything like that. If you can't communicate, it doesn't matter, right? One of the big challenges taking over the program was numbers. So retaining numbers, building numbers, and I'm definitely seeing successes in that. I think I'm going to bring in another really big 8th grade class, which is great. I'm going to bring back, I think we're going to have 23, 24 returners from freshman to sophomore year. My sophomore to junior group is about 18 strong. My current senior group, they're talented, but it's a small group. I got about 7 kids that are going to be suiting up next year as seniors. So retaining talent, right? And I think that comes with building an enjoyable product, right? And again, enjoyable doesn't mean soft, and enjoyable doesn't mean easy. But it can't be, beating our head against the brick wall with no reward at all. Or again, we're just going to lose kids. So that's kind of, we try to keep everything exciting. We try to keep everything fast paced. We do really tailor everything we're doing to the talent that we have. Square peg in a round hole sort of thing just doesn't work. That's not what my mentality is. So for example, we get Jared Daughtry, who was our quarterback this year, and he's graduating. He's going to play at Endicott, phenomenal player. He had a very, very unique skill set. Most of the time he was the best athlete on the field. So regardless of who the quarterback is next year, and we anticipate a really, really great quarterback competition that's going to go throughout the summer, through the preseason, and through most of the season, none of them are going to be built like he was, for better or worse. So I'm not going to be calling the exact plays that I would have been calling, with Jared out there. And if it goes one way, it goes one way. If it goes the other, it goes the other. So we'll have everything built in, to be prepared to put guys in the best position to be successful. So that's really kind of the core principle is we have to be flexible as coaches with our mindset. And again, I'm not a believer in having 9,000 plays. It's 12 or 14 plays out of different, formations. We have a lot of speed. We have a lot of athletes. So it's about getting the ball to those guys, right? And however that kind of looks is kind of the core of what we're doing. And then, obviously the goal is to score big points every week and hold the opponents down. And, so with the new facility, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to come see
it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So, when we were rolling a couple of games last year and even the year before, when that place is packed and the Black Knights are doing their thing, it's as good an atmosphere as there is. And the fans feed off that, the community feeds off that. And I think that's helped to kind of build some interest as well. So the philosophy is get kids, retain kids, have them, kind of get past that fear. Maybe they haven't played before. We're actually bringing back tackle football at the youth level. It took a 1-year hiatus, which was rough. And it was thin for a few years before that. So there hasn't been a great feeder system. That was another kind of staple when I was interviewing that I said, we have to figure out. And Malachi Baugh, who's on my staff, he's a Stoughton guy. He's working tirelessly. So he's got Stoyak football back up and running. So we're going to have tackle football in the fall at the youth level, which again, is just going to be instrumental for me to kind of continue to build. I'm going to have camps for those kids, clinics for those kids. So again, I'm not getting them for the first time as freshmen.
Right.
Which
you're at a huge disadvantage. And unfortunately, you're seeing it now with so many communities around here dropping tackle football at the youth level. And, honestly, Chris, to me, I think you're doing those kids a disservice, because I get not wanting your kid to play tackle football until a certain age. But the reality is, if they're not playing by 7th grade, it's a really hard adjustment to go from never having hit anybody or played the game fundamentally with pads on to now playing the game with pads on as a freshman. It's a big jump if you've never done it before.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we're excited about that. And like I said, having the community support, having the right people in place for that is going to be awesome. So again, hats off to all those people involved.
Yeah, and you kind of sort of got into this. You've been answering my questions. One question I had, which is great. Offensive, defensive philosophy. You talked about it, and even your predecessor, Greg Burke, I'd have conversations with Berkey where he'd say, you know what? He'd say to me, Johnny, having a 1,000 plays is no good if you can't run them. You're better off having 5 or 10 good ones that you can run all the time and count on them. You seem to have a similar approach. If please correct me if I'm wrong, but what is your offensive and defensive philosophy as a whole? Not necessarily what are you running, but what are you looking to accomplish?
Yeah. So on our passing stuff, we want the ball out quickly. We want to get our athletes the ball in space. I believe in a strong power run game. What that looked like for us last year, was power running out of spread formations. This year we got a lineman back, a few really, really talented guys. So, we might be packing the box in a little bit more. But again, if you can run and run and run, that's great. And then, soften up the defense, get the ball out in space, and look to see what's working defensively. We want to make people uncomfortable. And again, obviously coming from an offensive standpoint, if the quarterback's uncomfortable, you're in a great spot. So we want to attack. We want to be aggressive. We want athletes to be able to make athletic plays. So we toyed with a couple things last year, had some successes, had some not so much successes. So we've really been able to kind of evaluate where we're going to be at. We're going to look to attack and force high school kids to make high school mistakes, and not sit back on our heels and wait. We're not going to do a bend but don't break mentality because, a well-coached team in the Hawk gets into the red zone, they're going to score. Really looking to attack between the 20s to prevent that. We were pretty advantageous with our turnover totals last year, which again, I think comes from being aggressive. And we also had a phenomenal defensive back group. We're going to be a little stronger up front this coming year. So we're going to be looking, to dial up more pressure and to alleviate some of the pressure on the back end. So again, evaluating what we have and putting them in the best position possible. But if we can attack and go fast and keep people uncomfortable, that's what we want to do on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned is coaching. Of course, it is getting harder and harder to find people that have the time to coach. It's not necessarily that there aren't quality people out there that want to coach. It's a matter of whether or not they can coach. Can they make the commitment? I've been a head coach. I know how hard that is. Oftentimes you lead on your contacts, you lead on people and that those people end up coaching with you or they open the door to someone else coming on board. But how has that gone for you in terms of having a staff that is not just a staff that understands Stoughton football and can relate to the kids, but can teach the game as well?
Yeah, so I've been really, really fortunate. All of my coaches have either played for Stoughton or been around Stoughton. In addition to that, most of the guys have played some level of in college, and they're all really, really, really great guys. So, one of my assistants, Evan Taylor, he's a Stoughton legend, 1,000-point scorer. He's the head basketball coach. So he's already got kind of that head coaching, scheduled down. Andrew Iverson, another Stoughton grad. He's on my staff. He's the head wrestling coach. So he's around the building all the time. And I've added a few. So we're going to have 5 alumni who have graduated in the last 6 years are going to join the staff this year. So again, just the institutional knowledge that I talked about, kind of what the expectations are coaching within the league. And then these are all, a lot of those guys are guys that I've coached. So I also know that they're coachable and that I can mold them in the way that I, need them to be. And more than anything, they're awesome guys. Cause I think, at a certain point, we're not reinventing the wheel. I don't think any new iterations of football are coming out. So, to your point, there are a lot of people out there who can coach football. But it's really, really important to get the right mix of guys who understand, who can relate, who can connect. And I think I've been really fortunate because I put together a group who can do that. So yeah, I'm excited. Like I said, we had that clinic on Sunday, and so almost the entire staff was there, and it was it was nice. It seemed like we'd been together for about 20 years. And, so we're humming with that group, which is great.
And final question here for you, Coach. And again, I want to say thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Just some thoughts on the upcoming season. You mentioned Jared Daughtry and him graduating. You did talk about your senior class. You have a lot of guys coming back that played last year. Just some thoughts on the upcoming season, and who are some guys that we can look forward to watching play this fall?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, we're going to be returning, 3 or 4 guys up front. The highlight of that group is going to be Devin Rossi Benson. He's going to be a senior. We started him as a sophomore, kind of just threw him in trial by fire, and he was raw, but he was tough. Guys would look at him and say, "Oh, that's a classic Stoughton kid right there." But he's worked incredibly hard. He's got his body in a great spot. He's a moose, but he's a kid who's going to play 80, 90% of downs, and whether that's triple teams or whatever, he's ready for it. So we're going to rely on him. We got Jackson Arnold and Aiden Rideout also returning on the offensive line. They're both sophomores. They both played a decent amount as freshmen for us. And again, a kind of trial by fire situation. We're going to have a really healthy quarterback competition going. Right now, there's 3 or 4 guys who I feel really confident in that. If one of them wins the job outright, that's awesome. If they're sharing the job and they're helping out other places too, that's great as well. And then Wes Tinkham is returning. He's a guy who's getting a lot of college attention right now. Phenomenal kid, phenomenal athlete. It's funny, after the season, kind of going back and watching the film, he would pop up everywhere. Opportune times. He was always finding the seam. He was always making the big catch. He was making the shoestring tackle. So we're really excited to have Wes coming back. And then there's some great other talent in our sophomore class. Xavier Vicente is a kid who, as a freshman, our captain, 2A starter, went down, got hurt. He replaced him on offense, defense, and every special team. And then last year as a sophomore, he just kind of took off running like that. He's taking a leadership role. He's a guy who's going to be all over the radar for colleges. And then, we're really excited about the younger group that we have too. So biggest group of freshmen that we've had, and we're retaining, like I said, almost all of them. So being able to kind of grow with them and get them acclimated. I think we're heading in a great spot. We got a nice, tough schedule. And again, there's no cupcakes out there, as you know better than anyone. But we're excited about the competition that we're going to see both within the league and outside of the league. I think, with the playoff system, with the Hawk, I think you get the strength of schedule points.
Oh, yeah. You're playing Foxborough, Mansfield North. You're going to, it's in many ways, the Davenport's become the old school Hawk now.
Right. And I have had a couple with the system, so we're playing Norwood, we're playing Somerset Berkeley, we're playing Attleboro, and we're playing Hingham. So those are all great games. I've had a couple of people say, "Well, Coach, why wouldn't you go out and find an easy win?" And I'd say, "Well, first off, there's no such thing, and secondly, it wouldn't do us any good to have a cupcake in our schedule. Yeah. You don't want to." You get a cupcake, and then you got to go up against Foxborough, and then Mansfield, and then North Attleboro. It would put our kids in our program in a really, really bad spot. So we're excited with what we have. We're going to compete every week. I think we're really going to surprise some people. It's an exciting time to be a part of Stoughton athletics, and I'm just really, really fortunate for the student athletes that I do have that are taking the time and the commitment. Again, I'm like the luckiest person on earth. I feel like, having this opportunity, working in a school that I love working in, working in a environment that I love with the support that I have. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm itching for the calendar to turn over, and I'm not wishing away the summer at all. We get some plans, we got some good stuff going on, but to really, really know that when summer's over, the real fun starts. That gets me out of bed every morning. So that's awesome.
Well, Chris, I want to say thank you for taking the time, Coach. Really appreciate it. And I know the Stoughton football program. I've been around it. I've coached against you guys for years, and I know it's in great hands here, and your reputation speaks for itself. And we're excited to see you guys take that next step. And we definitely look forward to getting out there and catching you guys live.
Absolutely. Yeah. Come on by. It's a great place on Friday nights. And just a side note, I'm super, super grateful for everything that you guys do. The New England Football Journal, you guys are doing a phenomenal job promoting all levels of New England football. And I think, just having a tool like this to promote all the great stuff that's going on is so huge for us. So I really appreciate you having me on and everything that you guys are doing.
Well, I appreciate the time, and that's what we're here for. You know what I mean? Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're football guys. We love the game, and it's about promoting the programs and the kids and the coaches and all involved. So thanks again for taking the time, Coach Evans, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, John. Take care.
All right. That is Chris Evans, head football coach at Stoughton High School. That'll do it for this week's episode of the Coaches Chat. For Coach Evans, I'm John Ternitas. Till next week. Peace.